Good evening, everyone. My name is Les Smith, and with the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's conversation of the MPART PFAS Town Hall. Our discussion this evening will be centered around the Gogebic-Iron County Airport investigation. I'd like to pass the virtual microphone over to the MPART executive, Abby Hendershot, who will have some opening remarks.
Good evening. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Appreciate your time and energy as we get going on a beautiful night. We've got some information for you on PFAS, on this particular airport, and we're going to go through a variety of slides that we will also be recording and putting up on the website, so it will be available later. And let's go to the slide so that we can do, are you going to do housekeeping and then we'll do introductions?
Okay. Mike, if you go ahead and advance the slide, the next slide there.
For some reason, Les, it has locked up.
Oh, okay. All right. Bear with us, folks, just a moment. Will we get that straightened out?
Les, do you want me to try sharing my screen?
Sure, sure. I think you should be able to go ahead and share over top of Mike.
Okay. All right, do you see my screen?
There we go. There
Yes.
we go. Okay. All right. So let me take it from there, Amy. So I am Abigail Hendershot. I am the MPART, which is the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team Executive Director. I just started in this role on April 1st. And so I have been in the world of PFAS for quite a long time, but welcome you all here tonight. I want to take time to introduce the rest of our team who's here tonight to talk to you and give you some great information about this Gogebic Airport, as well as information specific to PFAS. If you can go to the next slide. So as I said, I'm Abby Hendershot, MPART Executive Director. We have on our health side, we have from the Department of Health and Human Services, we have Rosa Hyman. She's our toxicologist for this site. For specific investigation area information, we have Zachary Puchez from Mead and Hunt. Mike Jury is our Eagle project manager. He will be taking you through the residential well sampling that's prepared and starting, and then I will come back and talk to you more about the MPART website and some additional information that you can have on that. And then there will be plenty of time for questions and answers, and Les is going to walk you through the logistics of how to do that. Les?
Thank you, Abby. Again, I'm Les Smith with the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. Also have working with me behind the scenes is Mr. Matt Tomlinson. We are jointly your co-host behind the scenes for this evening's conversation. I just wanted to let you know that the webinar is being recorded, and we will have a recording available in a few days following tonight's conversation. Just also wanted to let you know that all of your microphones are muted. We really hope that you do hear us. We won't be able to hear you. However, on the next slide, I will share with you how you can communicate with us this evening. At any time during the conversation this evening, please feel free to type a question in the Q&A box located in the bottom of your screen here in the Zoom webinar. Also, if you're new to Zoom, you can also raise your hand during our question and answer session later on. There's a hand icon that you can raise. And we do have about 3 callers for our panelists. We do have 3 callers, so when we're doing our descriptions, just keep that in mind. For our callers that are on the phone, if you have a question that you'd like to ask this evening, you can select the pound key and the number 2 to electronically raise your hand. And myself and Mr. Tomlinson will keep an eye out for that when we get through the to the question and answer session. And we'll go back over the housekeeping again when we get to the Q&A session later this evening. And with that, Abby, you can proceed with your presentation.
All right, thank you, Les. So let's go through the basics of MPART and PFAS and just talk in some broad generalities before we get into the site-specific stuff. So MPART started as a executive order back in 2019, and actually is a way of, it's a collaboration structure. So it really is very unique, has a multi-agency approach incorporating 7 different departments at the state level that helps us coordinate all of the PFAS activities down and leads not only coordination, but cooperation on all kinds of levels, all the way down to the local levels. But it really helps us to direct that implementation of state strategy on PFAS and, you know, is truly the response activities that we need for this particular contaminant. So next slide. So the issue with per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, which we're going to say are PFAS, and you'll hear PFOS, which is different, but PFAS is the whole family of compounds. This particular family of compounds has a very strong carbon-fluorine bond, and that's one of the reasons that it's so stable in the environment and so well liked for industrial uses, is because it's very stable. It repels water, oil, fats, and greases. We started, you know, using it back in the late 40s, early 50s, and we know that the family of compounds makes up about 5,000. And so we use it for all kinds of things. If you can go to the next slide. And so it really, the use of these family of chemicals is transcends pretty much everything we do in our modern industrial lifestyle. Everything from the Gore-Tex that might be on your clothing to, you know, we've got food packaging, dental flosses, all kinds of different uses. And so it's very heavily relied upon at this point. Next slide. So what is the really concern here? So the biggest issue with PFAS is that not only are we finding it pretty widespread, but it doesn't break down. PFAS, because the molecular structure is so stable, it is very hard to get rid of. It doesn't biodegrade in the environment. And actually, it can actually bioaccumulate. It can build up in our ecosystem, and the fish can then work its way through the food chain and end up bioaccumulating in our bodies. And so we know that PFAS have a variety of different health effects. The data is still pretty early for the toxicological effects to our bodies, but we know there are some, and so that's being heavily studied right now. And we also don't have a standard at the national level for any of the PFAS. EPA's got some you know, lifetime health advisories for PFOA and PFOS, but Michigan has actually led the nation in establishing those standards. So next slide. So this slide shows you not only the ecosystem, but it also shows you all the different places that Michigan MPART has been sampling to try to identify where are those hotspots for PFAS, where are they circulating through our environment and ecosystems. So you will notice on the left-hand side that you'll have an industry who may have be using PFAS in a variety of different industrial practices that may have a direct release to the groundwater, or they may have some sort of an industrial discharge that they may send some processed water to the wastewater treatment plant. If they send PFAS to the wastewater treatment plant, the wastewater treatment plant does not have an ability to break that down or transform that. So it ends up just passing through the wastewater treatment plant. And that can either head to the landfill as part of a sludge. It could end up in a farm field as some biosolids for farm nutrients. And so we end up with this cycle that you may have, you're going to have to look at it from all different viewpoints. We also know that there are homes. We're testing residential homes for PFAS because of groundwater contamination. We're testing rivers because of fish and all of those direct discharges to the lakes and streams, as well as, starting to get into plant studies, crop uptake studies, looking at landfills. So pretty much everything on this slide here is part of the MPART world in what we're studying and investigating. So next slide. So one of the, one of the key pieces in this multi-layer approach of MPART is not only to look at groundwater data, but to also look at surface water data. And it has a couple of aspects. Not only do we sample the surface water itself, but we also sample the fish, and we've been sampling foam across the state, because in some cases, PFOS will float on top of the water surface, and when you have a strong breeze, it will actually create foam. And so that's been a major component of our surface water investigations, as well as getting out and doing a pretty rigorous sampling regime across the state for fish and for surface water. So next slide. So when it comes to groundwater, what we're actually comparing the numbers to is pretty unique in the country, because Michigan has actually, we have promulgated what we call maximum contaminant levels. Those are for municipal drinking water wells, but for residential drinking water wells, we also have groundwater cleanup standards, which is what you see here. And all of these standards were run through MPART, and we actually had a science advisory board that we established, all independent outside academics that gave us their best information on the science and toxicological inputs for these compounds. And so these are now all effective as regulatory standards for groundwater cleanup and for use for drinking. And so these are the numbers that we will be using, and these are all in parts per trillion. So PPT is parts per trillion. So if you can go to the next slide. Currently, today we have 161 other PFAS sites, MPART sites in the state. Those are all being prioritized based on what the known or suspected source is, definitely addressing all the drinking water wells as the first course of business, and then using the information to make sure that we've defined the extent of that contamination. So there's lots, this map really doesn't do it justice as to all of the work that's being done, but it's pretty substantial. Next slide for me, Amy. So one of the other pieces that's very unique about MPART is that we have established a citizens advisory work group. And these are residents who are volunteering their time, and they are coming from our impacted PFAS communities. So we've got some pretty hard hit areas around the state. And these residents are actually helping MPART to not only help us to engage residents and empower communities, but also how to educate the general public, and then just giving us a sounding board for the information and the ideas, so that we have that key feedback from people who are actually, on the front lines of this PFAS issue. So we're going to talk more, and I do believe that we have some of our citizen advisory work group members actually on the call today and are listening in to help us with refining our presentations and giving additional key feedbacks. So if you are interested in being a citizens advisory work group member, I will show you at the very end how to get to that web page so that you could submit a form to be part of that team and or just sit and listen into some of the meetings. So now I'm going to pass it over to Rosa Hyman, our toxicologist for the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. Rosa.
Human Services. You will see here my contact information, my phone number, in my email. If you have any question, don't hesitate to send me an email or give me a phone call. Next one, please. So first, I'm going to talk about the role of NDHHS and the local health department. So our role is to try to understand the health concerns that the community is facing. For that, we developed a plan to investigate and address the health risk. In this plan, EGLE leads the site investigation, and NDHHS and the local health department lead the public health planning and response. We also evaluate PFAS exposure to residents in the community, in where we recommend public health actions as needed. Next one, please. So how people can be exposed to PFAS? So the main route of exposure is through injection. For example, by drinking contaminated water, by eating fish caught from water contaminated by PFAS. So once we know that there are PFAS in lake or river, we sample the fish, and if the fish have levels of PFAS, especially PFOS, because we know PFOS can bioaccumulate in fish, we issue an Eat Safe Fish guideline for those specific lakes and rivers. Another way in which people can be exposed to PFAS is by incidental swallowing of contaminated soil or dust. And we can see this most in children because of the hand-to-mouth behavior. Also by eating food packaged in material containing PFAS, and by using some consumer products. It's important to say that PFAS absorption through the skin is typically not a concern. So people can keep using the water to wash their dishes, to showering, or to bath. Next one, please. So most of the people in the United States have some levels of PFAS in their blood. Here we see a study done by NHANES. In this study, NHANES studied these 4 PFAS: PFOS, PFOA, PFHXS, and PFNA. And they studied those PFAS in the blood. So we see here a graph with the results, and the y-axis represent the average levels of PFAS in the blood, and the x-axis represent the year. So one of the things that we see here is that there is a decrease of the levels of PFAS over time, especially for PFOS and PFOA. And the reason for this is because in 2002, companies reduced the production of these 2 PFAS. So when you have less production, people are going to have less exposure to these PFAS. Therefore, less absorption of these PFAS in their blood. Next one, please. Now I'm going to talk about some health effects that have been associated with PFAS. And those health effects are reduced fertility, high blood pressure or preeclampsia in pregnant women, a small decrease in infant birth weight, high cholesterol, especially total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol, also known as bad cholesterol. Next one, please. Other health effects that have been associated with PFAS are thyroid disease, liver damage, decreasing immune system response to vaccines, developing certain type of cancer, in particular kidney and testicular cancer, and we see this particular and only with PFOA. But it's important to know that if you have been exposed to low levels of PFAS, that doesn't mean that you're going to develop health effects. Usually people need to be exposed to high levels of PFAS for a long period of time to be more likely than the average person to develop health effects in the future. Next one, please. So now I'm going to talk about different factors that we consider when we make our public health response determination. And those factors are our NDHHS comparison values, the residential well results, and we evaluate those ones individually and collectively. Also site-specific information. For example, do we know the source of the contamination? And also the geology. Next one, please. So what is the NDHHS comparison value? So the NDHHS comparison value are the lowest of the NDHHS public health drinking water screening level and the import health base value, also known as the maximum contaminant level or MCL. It's important to know that both of these screening levels were set to protect everyone, including those most at risk of harm to their health, including fetuses and breastfeed babies. Next one, please. So these NDHHS comparison values are PFOS, that is 8 part per trillion, PFOA, that is 8 part per trillion, PFNA, that is 6 part per trillion, PFHXS, that is 51 part per trillion, PFHXS, I'm sorry, that is 51 part per trillion, PFPS, that is 420 part per trillion, PFHXA, that is 400,000 part per trillion, and Gen X, that is 370 part per trillion. Next one, please. So we also evaluate the results individually and collectively. For example, so we evaluate each of your results, and we compare those one with the Michigan comparison values. Here we see different houses with different colors. The blue houses mean that there are no levels of PFAS. The yellow houses mean that when we compare the result with the Michigan comparison value, the levels are lower than the Michigan comparison value. And the red houses mean that those houses have exceedance of the Michigan comparison value. And we evaluate the house collectively. In the first example, we see a yellow house that is surrounded of blue houses. So the yellow house means that there are low levels of PFAS. And that house that have low levels of PFAS is surrounded of houses that have no levels of PFAS. So that also let us know something. With that information, we know that there is no high source of PFAS in the area. Then the second example, we have a yellow house again. So these houses have low levels of PFAS, but this time is surrounded of houses that are red. That means they have high levels of PFAS. And that information also let us know something. This information let us know that there is a high source of PFAS in the area. And because we don't know if levels of PFAS may change over time, our health recommendation for that yellow house may be more protective. Next one, please. So another factor that we take into consideration is the site-specific information. For example, do we know the source of the contamination? Is this contamination coming from a landfill, for an airport, for a paper mill? Do we know the geology? So we're trying to understand, where is your well located? Is your well located in sand? Is your well located in clay? Also, we're trying to understand the plume of the contamination. Where is your house located in this plume of the contamination? Next one, please. So another thing that before going to the next presentation is that once we have all these factors and once we consider all these factors, we make our public health recommendations. And that public health recommendation could be, first, that there is no action needed. Second, that we may provide filters or alternative source of water. And the reason why we may provide filters or alternative source of water is because, well, maybe we will need more investigation. Maybe we'll need more time to understand more the contamination in the area. Or second, well, because maybe we don't know if the levels of PFAS may fluctuate over time. Like the example that we show, like the second example with the yellow house. And lastly, our recommendation could be to provide education to people. Give education to people about PFAS in drinking water. Next one, please. So now I'm going to let you with Zachary Bouchard, and he's going to talk about the phase 1 sampling result. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Rosa. Appreciate it. Hello, everyone. My name is Zachary Puchaz. I am an airport planner with Mead & Hunt. And with me is Jessica Blia. She is a hydrogeologist with Limnotech. We're part of the consulting team that was hired by the airport to determine if PFAS was present at the airport, and we'll provide a brief overview and the results of our effort. Next slide, please. So to begin, in July of last year, 2020, the airport voluntarily applied for an EAGLE grant to see if PFAS was present at the airport. And in August of 2020, the airport was awarded a grant from EAGLE, and Limnotech and Mead and Hunt was the team hired to conduct that, a search, I'll call it, to see if PFAS was present on the airport. And our sampling, first off, I should say the airport and us on the consulting team conducted a review of historical records to determine where PFAS might be present. And our records found one primary site. So that was the focus of our efforts in doing the sampling. And that sampling was conducted in November of 2020. And I will turn it over, next slide, please, over to Jessica Blia at Mead and Hunt, who will go through an overview on the sampling effort and the results.
Great, thanks, Zach. So as Zachary mentioned, the primary objective of the phase 1 investigation at Gogebic Iron County Airport was to either identify the presence or the absence of PFAS in soil, groundwater, and stormwater. And again, this was determined, this green area here where it says the AFFF use area was the primary location of our investigation. The investigation included 4 soil borings, which are designated as the little checkered circles that you see there. And they were drilled to a depth of between 14 to 18 feet below ground surface. And from those borings, we were able to collect soil samples and groundwater samples. So from each one of those borings that were drilled, we collected 2 soil samples, one from the upper foot of the soil profile, and then one right above saturation. So where if we encountered groundwater, it was the foot right above where saturation occurred in the soil. Additionally, the groundwater samples were collected via a pump from those borings before some of those borings were closed. And in addition, we also collected 3 stormwater samples from stormwater locations located mostly on the north side of the runway 927. And you can see, Amy, thank you very much for circling them. We designated them as stormwater west, central, and northeast. In addition, 3 permanent monitoring wells were installed in 3 of the 4 borings, and you can see them being designated as monitoring well 20-01, 2, and 3 on the figure. With that, please next slide, Amy. So another aspect of our investigation was to determine groundwater flow in this area. So from the monitoring wells that were installed, we took depth of water measurements, which ranged from about 8 to 12 feet below groundwater surface. And from there, we were able to determine groundwater flow direction, which is designated by that big blue arrow right there. And it's basically to the northwest. And it's important to note that this was the direction of groundwater flow the week that the investigation was conducted, which again was in November 2020. And it may vary over time or seasonally. Next slide, please. So here is our figure of the sampling results, and it's going to show the sampling results from the stormwater surface water locations that we took, and from the groundwater samples that were collected. We did find one of our soil samples had PFAS in it, but it did not contain any PFOA or PFOS. So this slide doesn't show any soil results. So with this, real quickly, I want to point out that you can probably see that there's an nanograms per liter, or the NGL, after the name of the sampling location. That's the same unit as parts per trillion. And ND, if you see that there on your screen, that means not detect, so that compound was not found. So looking at this slide very briefly, you can see that some PFAS was found in every groundwater sample. So 3 of the 3 groundwater samples did show some PFAS PFOA and PFAS were only detected in one of those groundwater samples. And then again, some PFAS was found in every stormwater sample. So 3 of those 3 samples, we did find some PFAS. Additionally, it's also important to point out, we're just showing, I wanted to mention briefly that we are only showing PFAS compounds that had some sort of regulatory standard to them. So there are other compounds that were tested, but this slide just shows the ones that are have some cleanup criteria or some water quality standards applied. Last but not least, the most important thing to take away from this slide are the highlighted values. Hopefully you can see them. They're a little bit yellow in the background, and they represent exceedances for PFAS compounds. So in drinking water from one location, which is the location that we are dubbing monitoring well number 1, did have exceedances for 3 compounds, and those compounds were PFOA, PFOS, and PFHXS. And you can see that highlighted right there on the northern portion of the slide. Of the test areas, the most northern well. And then finally, keeping in mind with the groundwater, our groundwater direction, the stormwater location in the northeast, which is the headwaters of 6 Mile Creek, we did have an exceedance of PFOS. But it's important to mention that the water quality standard for PFOS in surface water is 12 parts per trillion. So we are just barely over, but we have an exceedance nonetheless. So with that, we are going to take this information and apply it towards our next phase, which is affectionately dubbed phase 2, which I believe Zach will now brief everyone on.
Yes, thank you, Jessica. Next slide. So the next step in the process is to, as Jessica mentioned, conduct a phase 2 investigation, and that'll be focused on those areas on airport where there was an exceedance of PFAS found over the state of Michigan criteria. And currently that process is being scoped with Eagle, and it will likely include additional groundwater and stormwater sampling. With that, I believe Mike Jury from Eagle is our next presenter, and I will turn it over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Zach. I'm going to talk to you, first of all, good evening, and we're glad that you're here. And if we could go to the next slide, I'm going to talk about the residential well sampling that Eagle will be attempting to conduct. So letters were mailed out to 24 residents and businesses on March 24th. And I had hoped that I would get responses by today, and today being April 6th. Our proposed start time will be next week, actually the week of April 12th, and we'll be starting on April 13th and possibly also on the 14th as necessary. So we've received 7 responses back so far. I'm hoping that some of you are listening tonight, and that after listening to this presentation, you'll decide to go ahead and sign the access forms and get them off to me. So we're going to start with a phase 1, just like the airport did. We'll do a phase 1 res well sampling around the airport, and we'll have another slide to show where that's going to be at. And if we find that that sampling that we do finds a lot of different things, then we'll need to do probably another phase. So if we get results that indicate the need, we will definitely come back and do another phase of sampling. So if you'd be so kind, Amy, to go to the next slide. And so what is that area that we're looking at sampling? So if you can think of the airport, for those of you who are on the phone, you went too far, Amy.
Yeah.
That's rivers and streams. If you can go back 1. Well, I'll tell you what,
I can share it real quick, Mike.
Okay, I was going to say, otherwise I can go with the other part will work too.
Let me try this real quick, just because I think we got, there we go. All right, can you see my slides? Oops, share.
Not yet.
There we go.
Okay, great. That's perfect. Thanks. So For those of you who are on the phone, if you think of the airport in the center of a square, and we cut that square or the cake into 4 big slices, start up at the northeast corner of our cake slice. We'll call that, the northeast, we'll call that area 1. So in area 1, you'll see the Black River and Black River Road. So starting at Airport Road and Black River Road, we'll run north along Black River Road up to where 6 Mile Creek runs into the Black River. Just a little bit past that, there's a couple houses just, yeah, that's perfect. Amy, perfect right there. So that there's a couple houses up there, we'll catch those. So now if you think about it, Bale Road that runs north-south on the east end of the runway, we'll be sampling some homes on Bale Road. And then if you think of the next big square, that will be the northwest square, Skyway and Beagle Club Road. Those are areas that we will sample too. Also, those areas are in our area that we would like to sample. Area 3, which is the southwest corner, currently we don't have any plans to look at those wells. If we get results that point us to needing sampling, then we'll start that. And then if we think about area 4, which is the southeast corner of the big cake, that area we're going to be looking along Airport Road all the way from about the Airport Road to the airport and then to the east along that road. So that came up with about 24 homes. And by businesses, we would like to sample the airport terminal well that supplies water to passengers and the workers at the airport. There is also a soccer club field for local young adults to play soccer, and the township has been kind enough, and they will be turning on the water to that facility, and we'll get it there also. So my hope is, as I said, that if you received a letter and you haven't been able to get that information to me and sign off on that, that would be really great if you could do that. Our crew that will be doing the sampling will be coming from Wisconsin, from a company called AECOM. And AECOM is a consultant for the state of Michigan, and they do all of our residential well sampling. So they will be coming up, they will have badges, and they will contact you by phone to set up the time and which of the dates that they can do the sampling. So if you can go to the next slide, please. One of the other things that we're going to do is, for the folks on the phone, there are blue lines on this map that show us surface water features. So on the east end of our map, we show the Black River, and we've highlighted that. We've highlighted some surface drainage features on the airport, 6 Mile Creek that runs up into the Black River. And then also on the west side, there are some drains from the airport, and those end up running into Mud Creek being that blue line that runs north and south. We have a crew coming from our Water Resources Division that'll be in the Western UP this field season. By field season, we mean all the way up to when the things freeze over. They will be doing sampling of water and fish in Mud Creek and also in the Black River. Mud Creek, we were told by the DNR, is a popular fishing creek, and the same for the Black River is also a popular fishing area. So we will be collecting water in those areas too for analysis. So as I said, we will be doing the residential well sampling in those areas around the airport. And then also we will be doing the fish sampling and water sampling. The results of your sample from the day you get tested will take somewhere in the range of maybe as long as a month, depending on how busy our lab is. So your samples will go to the State of Michigan lab in Lansing and be analyzed there. And then of course, as soon as we get your results, we will share those with you. So if I could go to the next slide, please. So one of the questions that we always get asked is that folks that might be watching this that are on municipal supply, and there are areas in the general area of the airport, a couple miles away, that are on municipal water supply, which is supplied by Ironwood. And Eagle has sampled that supply first back in August of 2018, and it was sampled for 14 different compounds, and they were all non-detect. So then we sampled the supply again, Eagle did, in October of 2020, and this time was non-detect for 18 compounds. We added 4 additional compounds to take a look at additional types of PFAS. They're on an annual monitoring schedule, and their next sample is due to Eagle before the end of September 2021. So the good news for those of you who are in the area that are on public drinking water, your water has been sampled multiple times, and we have not detected any of the PFAS compounds that we analyze for. So if you can go to the next slide, please. And so one of the things that we would always like to show you, we mentioned there's 7 departments that work on MPART, and so Eagle, and you heard from MDHHS, the State Public Health Department, Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, MDOT, and you think MDOT, they do roads, but MDOT also does airports. And so MDOT is a valued partner in this. Down in the left-hand corner, DNR, and DNR, of course, doing work with wildlife and fish and other parts of our area. Lara, who's Lara? Well, Lara is the state fire marshal, and the state fire marshal is working with us to help us talk to local fire departments that may have AFFF along with the airport. And finally, the Department of Military and Veteran Affairs, and they are a valued partner because they are working with us to help the National Guard facilities in the state that have had PFAS exposure to the use of AFFF. So if we can go to the next slide.
I think we're going to go to the website. So
Right,
before we
so
go-
Abby will show you how to get to our website.
see if I can do this without, hold on, without hurting anything. Can you still see my screen?
If you have Ian Smith, yeah, there you go. We're
There
now
we
to the
go.
website.
Okay, so this is the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team website that Mike was just talking about. And if you type in MPART into any of your search engines, Google, Bing, whatever, you will come up with this homepage for the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team. And some of the popular pages, there's a lot on here. There's a lot of different things, but if you've got questions on PFAS sites under the popular pages, this is where the Gogebic Iron Airport will be. And it loads as a list. And then you can just scroll down, or you can type it into the, but let's just scroll down. Nope, not quite on this one. You can actually get onto it and see that the, there we go. You can, it's got a hyperlink on the name itself. And once you do that, you can actually see, here's the site itself with the site map that comes up. And the most recent information for that particular site, as well as any information on the public meetings that have been shared, and the information we've got for sample results. So this is all pretty preliminary because we don't have too many samples yet for this particular site, but this will be updated as phase 2 information comes in. The other thing I wanted to show you is that if you go back to the front of it, there is a ton of information here for if you've got questions on the Eat Safe Fish Guide that Rosa was talking about. You can look at the PFAS in fish. If you want to talk about drinking water wells, or you know somebody who would like to test their well for PFAS but isn't, is outside of this particular investigation area, there is some additional information for how to test your well or how to get in touch with the Eagle Lab. But we also have, as I mentioned earlier, the Citizens Advisory Work Group. And I just want to click on this and show you, if you have an interest and would like to be part of MPART Citizen Advisory Work Group, there is a lot of information here on a write-up of what the Citizens Advisory Work Group does. We have the calendar here that you can look at all of the different meetings for the Citizens Advisory Work Group. And then we can go and you can, talk to us about signing up or just attending meetings. The other thing that's very helpful is to look at the MPART calendar. And that is always up to date with all of the different meetings that are coming up for MPART. And you can see there's quite a few of these town halls or meetings that are going on any particular month. So this information is always here with the hot links to actually get into meetings or at least additional information. So pretty slick way of doing it. So I'm going to take and send it back to Les, who's going to talk to, let me minimize this and get us back to our thing. Les is going to talk to you about how to ask a question in Zoom. Les?
Thank you, Abby. Thank you all presenters this evening. I know there was a lot covered here this evening about PFAS and health issues, public health, and the investigation. So I'm sure that there's questions out there. We had this evening about 17 attendees this evening, and we still have a majority of the attendees with us. So if you have a question concerning the information that you heard this evening, please go ahead and type in your question in the Q&A box, or you may choose to select the hand icon to raise your hand. And for our callers that are on the phone, you may select the pound key followed by the number 2 key to electronically raise your hand as well. To ask a question of any of our panel this evening, we do have additional staff with us from several agencies. The local health department is with us this evening, as well as additional staff from the Department of Health and Human Services to help answer any questions that you may have this evening.
All right.
So,
Do we have any questions yet there, Les, or we?
not just yet. I'm sure we'll give people a chance. We have a hand. We actually have a hand was by phone, so I'm really excited about this. So for the caller with the last 3 digits, 129, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your phone line. You should hear a signal in your phone indicating you're unmuted. So just a moment. You have a question for our panel this evening?
Hi, thanks, Les. This is Loretta Crystal. I live in Ironwood, and I'm really interested in this investigation area because I'm inside the investigation area. I'm actually in the northwest quarter, and I have Mud Creek going right through my property. But I never received a letter from the airport, and I am concerned about that. Because I don't think I've even been notified about any of this stuff.
Great thoughts there. So I'm going to bring Mr. Jury on, and he can.
Okay, so
where you're at.
Well, thank you for attending. I'm glad that you're here. And you said you live where again, please?
In the northwest quarter, in the area 2, with Mud Creek going right through the property.
Okay,
right behind my property is
are you
where
on
that.
Skyway or Beagle Club?
No, I'm not that far north.
Oh, okay. Well, and then in that case, I would love to be able to talk to you. So what I'm going to do is hopefully you have something to write with.
I've been taking notes, thank you.
Oh, okay. But so we're going to go to the slide with my name and phone number and email address. And so you can see my phone number is 517-242-9578. And then also jurym1@michigan.gov is my email address. So I am not the most perfect person in the world. And obviously I missed you in my work and trying to figure out the folks that got the letters. That doesn't mean that I can't get one off to you immediately, along with the sample request form. So there's a form that we have you fill out, and that helps us
Okay.
out understand how deep is your well, do you have water treatment, and then also gives us permission to be on your property to take that sample. So I would
Okay.
be really happy to get that off to you. So please feel free to
But-
either email me with your address and information, or you can email that to me, and I will be happy to get that. Probably what I'll do is email it to you, and that way you'll have it in time to get on the list. And so, well, thank you for listening. It's appreciated, and I truly am sorry that I missed you. I thought I got
Well, that's
everybody,
okay.
but apparently I didn't.
I just wanted to add one more thing, because I know that the airport uses. Hello?
Yep,
Hello?
there you go. We hear
Okay.
you again. You cut off at airport. The airport uses what?
Oh, I'm sorry. That the airport uses, it's a foam. It puts out, it's a fire retardant. And I read in the newspaper about the PFAS. And so it was last summer that I contacted the health department and wanted my well tested. So I'm glad that this is being followed up with, because you
Right.
never know.
No, you don't. And so the airport does use what is called AFFF. They have not had to use that, as far as we know, on an accident there, but there is a law that requires them to test their truck to make sure that if there was an accident, they would be able to put out a fire immediately and save lives. So that is something that they have done as required by law. So they have not done anything illegal. I don't want anybody to think that the airport is a bunch of bad guys just running around doing things haphazardly. They follow the law and have done what they needed to do. So that's why they're doing this work to figure out where this material went. So yes, they have that there and have used it to test with. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, so please either call me at your convenience, or you can email me. What I'll need is your email address, and I will send you by email the form to fill out. And then we will schedule with you, and you'll either be sampled on the 13th or the 14th of April. So next week already.
Okay, thank you. Can you give me your phone number one more time? I
I'd
apologize.
be happy to do that. Sure. It's 517-242-9578. And my email address is jury, Jury, just like in the courtroom, M for Mike, the number 1, at Michigan, spelled all the way out, .gov. So jury M1 at Michigan.gov. So either way, call me, email me, whatever, and I will get the crew there to sample.
Thank you very much.
Well,
And if
thank
you
you.
happen to know, if you've got any other neighbors who didn't get a letter or are right there along the airport boundary, send them Mike's way too.
Yes, please.
I will. I think I'll take a walk up there tomorrow.
Perfect. Perfect. The more the merrier. And then this town hall will also be recorded. So if they missed it, we can always get them the slides and the recordings so that they can watch it when they get, up to speed and get informed.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, Abby, we do have a written question that's come in.
Okay. I'm not seeing them, so I'm going to let you read them.
Okay, all right. Well, the first question that I have written is, this concerns Jessica's presentation, portion of the presentation. Jessica provided details of the 12.3 PFOS reading of the northeast well. The requester is asking, was hoping for more or for further comparison of the phase 2 trigger reading with the actual reading of the SB 20-01-GW in parentheses 9 through 14 or 9-14 and the PFOA reading of 136, the PFOS reading of 24 and the the PFHXS reading on the 78.6, the 78.6. The results are yellowish, but it doesn't give an idea of how much over the trigger level. So they want further explanation on those wells.
Sure, yeah. Thank you very much, Tom, for the question. So you're talking about two different water criteria. So the first one that's easy to answer is for the stormwater criteria, which is also surface water, which is the STRMW Northeast. And the PFOS is highlighted as 12.3. And for the state of Michigan, the water quality standard is 12 parts per trillion. So we're just barely over that limit. So we're at 12.3. And then for PFOA, PFOS, and PFHXS in the groundwater well, those are drinking water quality standards. And for PFOA, that one is 8 parts per trillion. For PFOS, that is 16 parts per trillion. And then for PFHXS, that is 51.
And do you want to talk, Jessica, a little bit about the depth component of, you took a stream sample here and got 12, and then took a little deeper groundwater sample and got these different results. And so part of your phase 2 evaluation probably looking at that depth component to
correct. Yes. Yeah. And then yes. So you can also see it's a longer name, but the numbers that are in that parentheses, the 9 to 14 is the depth that sample, that drinking water sample or groundwater from. And then obviously the surface water sample was taken on the ground, on the surface. So the next phase of investigation will cover this area and will probably likely include additional groundwater sampling.
Excellent. Thanks, Jessica.
Okay.
This is Zachary Puchas with Mead and Hunt, and we'll obviously be working in cooperation with our partners with Eagle to scope what that additional investigation looks like. So it'll be a team effort to determine exactly where in the depth and what we'll be looking at.
Mm-hmm. And using by then we'll probably have the results of the first phase of residential sampling. Mike should have that stuff back. And so we'll be using all of that data together to develop that phase 2 approach.
Okay. It is just before 7 o'clock Central Time. We still have time for questions. I know we've had a couple here, but if you have other questions, please feel free to either type them in the Q&A or raise your hand. We'll be happy to unmute your mic to talk with the panel this evening. While we're waiting for additional questions to come in, Abby or Mike or Rosa, do you have any additional points you'd like to add beyond your presentation while we're waiting for additional questions?
Well, we hope that if neighbors are out there listening to this presentation and talk to your neighbors, and if they have a letter, it would be very helpful for me to have those letters signed and off to me. People have taken photos of them and emailed them by their phone. There can be regular snail mail, can send it. However you can get it to me, please do so, because I have to have the team up there to do the sampling. We want to get it done soon as possible so that you can have your results as soon as possible. And then of course that helps us also to set up, as it was said, our phase 2 investigation there. So please, 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 if you can get those off to me, that would be very helpful.
Mm-hmm. And I will add to Mike's information that these investigations are usually very iterative in that they build on each on itself as more data is gathered, as a better understanding of what we call the conceptual site model. So not only where the groundwater flows, where the stream flows, what that vertical and horizontal component of the contamination looks like. So how far out does it go? How deep into the soil or bedrock does it go? All of those are important details for us as we're evaluating not only risk to potential public health for drinking water wells, but also for understanding the components of how you put together an investigation and really assess what potential remedies might be available to the airport. And so really getting that 3D picture of what this contamination has done subsurface is important for us. And so that's usually takes quite a bit of time. So it's really important for us at the onset to know if there's any drinking water wells that have been impacted by this, so that that risk and that can get mitigated with filters so that nobody's drinking any impacted water, contaminated water, and then we can assess more time to go through a proper investigation for the actual on-site groundwater and soil contamination, surface water contamination, if there is such a thing.
And I should also point out two things that I forgot to mention. One is that the well sample is at no charge to you. The state will be doing that at our laboratory, so there is no charge for you to have your water tested. And then also secondly, if you're concerned about COVID issues, our preferred method of taking the sample is from the outside spigot on your home. So we are understanding that you may not want somebody in your home to do that sample. And then of course, we will do that outside from your spigot. So that's where we would prefer to do that sample.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Thanks, Abby. We have another question. I'm going to unmute caller 129. Okay, you should be able to, are you there? If you have another question, sorry.
Yeah, this is Loretta Crystal again. I do have another question for the panel. This is kind of hypothetical, but not really. The airport at Gogebic County is doing some clear cutting around the airport, and I've actually done, had geology, and I know that the filtration of any kind of chemicals are absorbed by vegetation, roots, and wouldn't it be better if there are problems of PFAS being in the soil or water or surface water or even in the well water? Wouldn't it be advantageous to keep the trees not logged and keep them there to absorb some of the PFAS, or, so it doesn't like flow downstream faster? Just a question.
Mm-hmm. That's what we call phytoremediation, and that is a real thing. But the studies for phytoremediation are still very, very much in the infancy stage for PFAS compounds. We know that because of the family of compounds, they can have 4 carbons, 6 carbons, 8 carbons, 10 carbons, 12 carbons. So depending on the link of the PFAS compound itself, it might get absorbed differently in different plants and different trees and in different parts of the trees. And so we know that there is some uptake of PFAS into plants and trees, but we don't know that it's really a viable remediation technology at this point. We don't have enough information to really make that assertion. And so, I think for low level contamination, it might be more feasible, but when we're just starting to try to get our hands wrapped around what the site conditions are, I don't think it's going to hurt anything at this point for them to continue to do what they are doing. I just think that, if there were some sort of PFAS in soils, so if there's a particular area where they were conducting PFAS train or firefighting training. And then that was to wash off, that ability to flow more quickly into streams and stuff might be an issue. But I think we would be speculating on all of it at this point, just because we don't really have enough data other than what you saw, the consultants present today about the east end of the airport. So, but you're right.
Right.
Give us a few years.
but-
We're going to catch up with the data on that one.
Right,
Of
because I
course,
know
we
that the
don't know.
fluid,
And we don't know whether or not the airport has a FAA mandate to cut these trees down. I don't know that. There may be some new regulation that trees above a certain height need to be cut so many feet from the runway, whatever. So I don't know the answer to that. There may be something they're doing for a reason for that. but,
oh no, I'm not going into the philosophy or, the politics of that. I'm just talking about geographic or
Oh, okay. Well, great.
geologically,
Mhm.
because the soil is actually, it's all clay. So we've got water that's, whatever's in the water is running off in the surface. It's going into Mud Creek. It goes through my property. I've been here for 10 years. I know what kind of soil I have. And I was just thinking, sometimes when you have vegetation, it holds any kind of pollutant rather than it washing off down to Mud Creek to where people fish. That's all.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Mike.
No, I was going to say, I'm agreeing that that is certainly a good point, that vegetation does slow groundwater flow and sheet flow. So yes, yeah, absolutely. It does do the things that she is mentioning.
Mhm.
Well, thanks. It's just an idea. I was thinking outside of the box, kind of.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Maybe you have a job with Eagle in the future.
And just remember, it doesn't biodegrade. So it can be taken up by some of the plants and stuff, but it's not going to actually be degraded by those plants. So it would just be captured until the plant dies or something else. So it really, PFAS is really unique because it just gets stuck in that cycle of our ecosystem, and we have to find ways to actually physically take it out. So. It's important stuff. All right. Any other questions, Les?
Hi, Abby. We have a new question. Does the airport have a maintenance department, which can also be a source of PFAS? And if so, does wastewater from the airport discharge drain into a creek that ends up in Mud Creek?
Well, I think Zach will probably need to come back on because I'm guessing that that's something they looked at and when they were doing their work to figure out where to do the sampling at. So Zach, give us what you know.
Yeah, absolutely. When we did our records research of products that contain PFAS at the airport, the only one that we found was within the firefighting foam. So to answer your question, the airport does have a maintenance department, but we, through our record search, did not find any product that they were using that contains PFAS. And that's just site specific to the Ironwood Airport. So the person asking the question, you're correct. It may be in some products at other maintenance operations elsewhere and at airports. And it is something we looked into, but our records did not find anything at the Ironwood Airport.
Okay, thank you, Zach. Abby, there are no new questions. We do not have any hands raised at the moment. I just want to remind everyone that, again, the webinar is recorded, and we will be sharing the webinar recording within the next day or so. It will appear on Eagle's YouTube channel and also on the MPART page concerning tonight's meeting. So just wanted to let you know to look for that in 2 locations within the next few days.
And I guess one last thing we should say is we really thank the Western UP Health Department for all the help that they provided in helping us determine houses and types of wells in the Ironwood area. So hats off to them. Thank you to both Kate and Tanya, who are a big help. Really, really appreciate it. So, and also your township supervisor, Jake Hangus, thanks to him also for the work that he did helping us out in the work that we're doing. So thank you, Jay.
Mhm.
Okay, there are no new questions, so won't hold anybody any further. Thank you all for spending this evening with us on this conversation. And again, look forward to seeing the webinar recording and to share it with friends and neighbors who were not able to attend. And with that, thank you and have a wonderful evening.
All right. Thank you.
Good night.